Chief of Staff for Governor John Bel Edwards, Mark Cooper, joins us this afternoon. Mark, thank you very much for making time for us.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.
So we had a big press conference today. Big news. The governor is going to keep us in phase 2 of the economic reopening plan moving forward. 28 days was the number that he put on there. Why 28 days? What was the thought process behind that being the number?
Yeah, well, first let me say when he talks about keeping us in phase 2, there's a lot of things that have been reopened, and when you look at where Louisiana is compared to other states, we're actually much more liberal than some of the other southern states. So when you say that, I need to make clear that there's a lot of things that are open, and much more than what we're looking at from other southern states. So it's not like we're keeping a lot of things closed. So I think to make that clear. And when looking at the 28 days, we're seeing an uptick, not only in Louisiana. I think your listeners when they're watching the news, it's all across the country. And when you're looking at the South, most if not all of the southern states are seeing a major increase in the number of COVID cases. Texas and Florida are tops in the country. I mean, when you see they show the red, and they're the reddest of red. And the reason for the 28 days, we just want to make sure that, we want to knock this thing out, or at least to get to a place where when we're looking at schools opening in August, when we're looking at kids going back to college, we want to make sure that we're taking care of this. And we feel like, and I know the governor talked about this today, we're going to see an increased communications campaign. We want to give that time to work. We want people to listen. We want people to wear masks. We want people to do social distancing. We want restaurants and businesses to follow what's already been put out there. And we want to show, use those 28 days, to give that time to work, because what we've seen is, and what other states are seeing, and they're talking about the same things the governor's talking about, including Governor Abbott in Texas and the other governors, is that we want to make sure that the things that we've already been talking about, that they're following those measures to tap this thing down as much as possible before we get a cure for this virus.
So there were mainly
vaccine.
Yes, there were mainly 3 regions that were pointed out today as kind of the leading increases or plateaus across the state. And even with just the 3 regions being the ones who are really seeing the increases, we're going to punish really the whole state here. And you're a 318 guy, Mark. So why should Shreveport face the same repercussions, and Bossier as well, that some of these other parishes and regions are going to go through when Shreveport and Bossier don't have those same increases?
Well, first of all, this virus doesn't look at parish lines or regional lines. I mean, people go from parish to parish and region to region. And when you look at Shreveport Bossier, there's some areas that look good, like hospitalizations. I think that number is kind of plateaued. But if you look at incidents for Shreveport Bossier over the last few days, they've actually gone up. Now whether that trend continues, time will tell. And that's why, the governor's being very cautious for the entire state. So when you look at the overall state numbers, that's not the case. I mean, we're seeing incidents for the entire state going up. Now, to be able to say that, when you look at trends, I mean, trends are longer than 4 or 5 or a week. To say that, trend lines are for the entire state are going up, you can't really say that. And when he talks about 3 regions, he's looking at trends over several days. But when you look over the last few days, including here in Baton Rouge, for example, that's not one of the 3 regions that he mentioned. But I know for a fact, around LSU, they've shut down bars in several of the areas around LSU, because they have seen a major uptick in cases. And, same thing in Shreveport, I think, not around bars particularly, but over the last few days, we've seen an uptick in the number of cases. So the governor, again, we just want to knock this thing out. And that's the reason why, we're doing it for the entire state. Because why maybe three regions that we're seeing a trend over, like the last 2 weeks, over the last several days, we're seeing an uptick in several of the regions.
Talking to Mark Cooper, he is the Chief of Staff for Governor John Bel Edwards. Earlier today, the reason that we're talking about this, Governor Edwards announced that Phase 2 will be extended for another 28 days starting on this Friday. Now, Mark, as I do the math, 28 days from this Friday will put us at about July 24th. That would be the start of a potential Phase 3. If that runs for the same 21 days we've been running, that'll put us into August 14th. How do we expect this? What kind of expectations do we have for school and colleges and elementary schools. If we're looking at that date range, how is that going to impact schools?
Well, I think if you look at phase 3, and first of all, when the president put out his guidelines for reopening of America, we've learned a lot more since then. And phase 3 is not very specific as to what that looks like. So there's a lot of latitude. And we're very hopeful, and I think the governor is too, that we can get to a phase 3 if people will just follow what's been put out there. And again, we're going to really up, the communications plan and getting information out there. And I think the governor talked about this too during the press conference. Where we're seeing the increase in cases is more in the younger adult population and younger people. And so that's who we're trying to target. And if they would just listen and do what health experts are telling us to do, we think we can conquer this. And those are the same ones you're talking about, that when school opens and colleges open up. I mean, I think that what we're going to see is that they're going to follow what we're talking, and then we won't have an issue once we get towards the end of July, and there won't be an issue with opening schools and opening colleges. And we're moving forward from a state perspective, with planning for that to for that to happen. I know that, we had a meeting last week with LSU, and that's their plan. I actually have a daughter that's going to be a freshman at LSU. She's getting information about her dorm. I know in talking with Coach O and the athletic director, Scott Woodward, the plan is for LSU football to move forward. But again, people have got to take this seriously. And we're not the only state. All the states in the country are looking at the same things that we're looking at. People have got to take this seriously. We're seeing an uptick. They need to wear masks. They need to social distance. And we're not shutting things down either. We're not going backwards with what we're opening. And if you talk to restaurant owners, I was in a restaurant at lunch today. There were tables that were empty. People were going in. We're seeing business and commerce. We really never shut down most of business. And the other thing, too, is on a case-by-case basis, we'll continue to look at requests to open other things up, but we're just technically not going to a phase 3. We're not increasing to 75%, which is what most people would associate, with a phase 3. But going to the end of July, we're hopeful that with this increased communications, putting more public service announcements out, targeting the younger population where these increased cases seem to be going towards, that people in Louisiana will again start doing what we were doing back, about a month or so ago when we started seeing the numbers drop, and then we'll be in a good position at the end of July to get to where we need to be so that schools can open, that colleges will open, all the things we want to see to get back to this new normal until we get this vaccine.
Mark, I've been watching some of the social media reactions since the announcement was made, and it sort of feels like most people are kind of throwing their hands up in the air and saying, all right, well, I'm just done then. Was there any thought put into maybe a phase 2.5 or maybe a staggered regional reopening to maybe show some progress and maybe give a little hope to some people instead of just going full state 28-day extension?
Well, I think part of it's a matter of semantics because, again, when you look at where we're at compared to other states, and they're looking at the exact same things that we are. If you look at where we are compared to other states and what businesses are open and what's going on right now, I mean, if you could right now look at what businesses in Shreveport-Bossier that aren't open, there are very few, and I don't know if you can really name anything other than, I don't know if there's still a water park up there. I know there used to be. That's probably not open right now. I think trampoline parks aren't open. I mean, churches are 50% of capacity, and they're working around that. And again, it's going to be a sacrifice, and it's a tough decision for the governor to make. But we're trying to look at short term. We're trying to look at long term, so that we don't have to suffer what we were going through back in March and April. And again, all the other states are looking at the exact same things. You're seeing all this play out in the national media. So I understand people's frustrations, and I understand businesses as well. But there are ways, and we're trying to work with businesses to increase, the number of customers coming in. We're not back to what we were in March and April. We're not shutting down businesses. We're just asking them to be a little bit more stricter with making sure that they're wearing masks, encouraging their customers to wear masks, so that we don't have to go backwards to where we were when businesses were shut down. That's not what we're saying here. We're just trying to be stricter with what we're doing as far as encouraging people to follow guidelines that have been issued, by our president and the COVID Council and others.
Mark, ever since I let people know that I was going to be talking to you this afternoon, the bat phone in the studio has been blowing up with text messages. And one that I've gotten from a few people is a question you might not be able to answer. There might not be an answer for it. And it might not be the state's role. But a lot of people are asking about some level of state stimulus, similar to what we saw from the federal government with the CARES package. With this extension, has there been any talk about finding a way to issue some stimulus to individuals and businesses in the state now that we're going to extend for 28 days in this phase?
Well, I do know at the federal level that there are still talks, and there's a package right now at the federal level that they're looking at an additional CARE 2.0 or 3.0. I don't remember what number they're at right now.
13.5 or something. But, I mean, we're deep into it.
Yeah, but at the federal level there are, and we're working with our congressional partners to look at that. But at the state level, there's not other than with the CARE package, the legislature had a bill that the governor signed that had to do for businesses, that $300 million. From the share that we got from the federal government that will go to businesses that the state treasurer is going to be running, that's something that's going to be going out to businesses. So to answer your question, yeah, that's something that many of your listeners may not be aware of, and they can call the state treasurer's office to get more information on that program.
Mark Cooper, he is the chief of staff for Governor John Bel Edwards. Mark, one of these times we're going to have to talk about something fun like LSU football or
I hope so.
It seems like this is all that we've got. So at some point we're gonna have a fun conversation. But thank you for being available all the time.
And any time. And again, we understand that people are still hurting out there, and we just want to get to a point where we can look at that and we can get back to normal. And I just encourage your listeners to, and I know you've seen it too, that just to wear the mask, do the social distancing, so that we can tap these numbers down. And you can look at the Louisiana Department of Health website to see how these numbers are going up. And again, it's just not Louisiana; it's across the South, it's across the country, and we can do this.
All right, Mark. Thank you once again.
All right, thank you.